Hello, welcome to the fifth lecture in the series on game design fundamentals. And this one I'm going to talk about some common terms in game design. I'm also going to discuss a few books which I've used on this course. The book that I would definitely recommend you read is The Challenges for Game Designers by Brenda Braithwaite and Ian Schreiber. The main reason is that this is not aimed solely at video games. In fact, it's aimed away from video games, more at board game designers. But the core lessons that it teaches and the principles of game design are the same in that as they are in the other ones in digital video games. So I definitely recommend that one to you. The second one there, The Art of Game Design, is a lot deeper a book, again aimed at video game development, but it does have some good core lessons in there, such as the first model of game design that we looked at, which is the elemental tetrad, which we looked at in lecture 2, which has the game aesthetics, mechanics, and technology and the narrative as the form of the model. The third book there, Game Feel, that's more about how some games just feel better to play, the difference between a great game and an average game, and how you get that game feel. The fourth book there is called Level Up. Again, it's very much towards video games, some good stuff in there. And the fifth one, The Fundamentals of Game Design, a very deep book which I used to get more information about a subject from. Well worth a look, but again, it's more towards video games. Okay, on to the definitions. There are a lot of terms in video games which you might not have heard of before, so I think at this point it's good to go through a few of these and explain what they mean, so that further down the line, if I start talking about the dynamics of the aesthetics, and you'll have an idea of what we're talking about. The first one is the difference between game design and game development. Game design is the creation of the rules and the content of the game, as we explained. Game development is the whole process of developing a game. Game design is part of game development, but there's also many other things involved in game development, such as programming, art, animation, level design, audio, quality testing, and marketing. Feature list is a list of key features or selling points of a game. This forms a part of your concept document when you come to do one. It's found, if you imagine the back of a video game, any video game you've ever seen in the shop, and you look at the back of it, it's those bullet point lists of what separates this game from all the other games of the same genre. A prototype, an early version of the game created by a designer. We create prototypes. You can see you also how quickly you can get a prototype, and it gives you a great idea of whether your game's going to work or not at the early stage. As part of iterative design, we create a prototype, we play it, test it, recreate the prototype until we got it to the level that we want it to. Balance. Is it too easy? Is it too difficult? As a game designer, your job is to get the exact balance between a game that's too hard, a game that's too easy. We had a look over in Greece at flow, the theory of flow. We'll be looking at it again, which is there's this magic line, if you look at it on the graph there, where you can keep a player engaged. And the balance is getting it between, if it's too hard, they get anxiety, frustration, and they give up, or if it's too easy, they get bored and they give up. Mechanics, again, it's the rule of the game. Dungeons and Dragons rulebook is the mechanics of that game. The dynamics, we're going to come on to this more, so I'll just quickly go over it. How players use the mechanics of a game results is the dynamics of a game, and they can be exploited by the player, and new ways of playing the game can be found through play testing the game, where the player comes up with new ways of playing the game that you never thought of when you created the dynamics. The image there is camping the spawn point. It's popular in game design, so popular that a t-shirt was made from it. It's a dynamic where in these first-person shooter games, like Call of Duty and stuff, in the multiplayer, players would just stand where players started the game and just shoot them and just stay there. And it was a dynamic that the developers did not consider, but is now a major part of the game. A system is a collection of game mechanics. So if you imagine an engine is made up of various systems. Like there's the fuel system, there's the cooling system. Games are the same. There's certain parts of the game, like might be a combat system, which is made up of a lot of mechanics, but that's kept separately than, say, the artificial intelligence system. It's easier to isolate errors or where the game isn't working if everything's encapsulated in systems, and all these systems are put together to work to create the game. The avatar is the direct representation of the player in the game world. If it's game of Monopoly, it'd be the dog, the boo, whatever you're playing as. The games that we made, we had the little fantasy figures that represented us in the game. In a video game, it's whichever character you're playing, be it like Lara Croft in Tomb Raider or just generic man with a gun if it's a first-person shooter. First-person shooter being a game where you are looking through the point of view of your actual eyes and you see the gun in front of you, whereas a third-person shooter would be you can see the character on the screen and your camera's sort of behind and off to the left of the shoulder. Playtesting, part of the iterative design process. When you create your prototype, you then playtest it to find errors, systematic testing of gameplay, systems balance, and interface to find all the errors, inconsistencies or issues, and report them to the design team, who would then go away, work on the errors that were found, create another prototype, and playtest again. The platform, the device that you are making your game for, this is more of a digital game term, be it the PlayStation 4, the Xbox could be a platform, a mobile phone could be the platform, the PC. The concept document is a high-level overview of the game. It has the bullet points that we talked about before as part of it. It forms part of the game design document. It's a breakdown of the features in more in-depth than the bullet points that were written before. The pitch, a brief elevator pitch given to a game publisher to solicit funds. It's a description of your game that's maybe 1 minute in length at the most. The name comes from the length of time. If you imagine you were at a conference and you met one of the biggest video game developers in the world, video game publishers, and you had a game idea and you had the time it took, you ended up in an elevator with them. The time it took for the elevator to get to wherever it was going, that's where the name comes from, to pitch your game. So it has to be really concise and really boils down your game into a 1 minute pitch at the most. It also helps keeping your game simple, and there's a thing called feature creep, which is where you start adding more and more to your game until it's out of control. The elevator pitch helps keeps it concise and to the point. The design document is the entire design vision for the game. It includes the concept document and also a functionality document which breaks down every little bit of your game. It can include concept art. It also, if you're working on a video game, it has a technical document which is more programming, bits of code that will help the programmers. It should be, if you're the designer, you could hand this document off to a development team and they could go away and develop your game. It'd be that much detail in this document. Bugs or errors in the game design code, art, sound, or writing. A video game or a digital game should be game tested to the point where all bugs have been solved and there's none in the game. If you are releasing a game to a store like the Apple Store, they will test the game extensively. If there's any bugs, they'll send it back to you. They have to keep up the reputation of the Apple App Store as just having a high quality product. So it's very important that you find all the bugs in a digital game during the development. A lot of games are released full of bugs. Then they have to be patched on day one. You'll have a download that'll fix all the bugs. This is due to extensive deadlines. There's one from Mario, which, as you can see, that's not exactly how it's supposed to look in the game. The engine is the core program used to develop the game. It does a lot of the stuff for you, so you don't have to start from square one every time you develop a game. Like it might do the physics for you, so you don't have to reprogram physics every time you do a game. Or it might have particle systems for creating explosions and this sort of thing. Or part of it will manage the audio, so you just plug in your sound clips. You don't have to start from square one every time. And the same engine can be used to create multiple games. The same engine can be used to create the same game and just released for multiple platforms. It all takes care of that. Some popular ones there are Unity, which I've used extensively, the Unreal Engine, Game Maker Studio, and Construct 2. Alpha, Beta, and Gold. These are terms, again, from digital game development. They're all to do with the development cycle of a game. The first stage will be Alpha, where the milestone at which all assets and code have been implemented. This is before you start on fixing all the bugs in the game, but you've got everything in the game that you need. There's no more design, there's no additional things going to be added to it. It's just fixing and polishing the game that you have at this point. Beta, many big bug and balancing issues have been addressed, and it's fine-tuned through playtesting. At this point, you might release this to a limited audience who play your game, so you can get a larger perspective. It's very much like the playtesting stage of a board game that we did, but on a video game. Something like Minecraft stayed in this stage for a year with just releases out to the public, and they get feedback off them and then improve on the game through this. And then the final version of the game is Gold, and this is, if a game's said to have gone gold, it's where it's sent off to the publishers, it's finished, and it's ready for release. A game jam. A group of individuals get together to create a game. They do this for board games, but the big one is for digital games. The thing is, a lot of people stay up for those days and sit in a room and they create a game. A lot of games that you play now will have started off as in one of these game jam sessions. And then a milestone, this is part of the planning of the game. When you begin creating a game, you set milestones. At this point, we want to have this much done. At this point, we're going to have this much done. And those milestones have to be met, because in the workflow of video games, there'll be somebody else next in line view. Like, for instance, you could be doing the animation of a game, and then the sound guy is waiting for those animations to be implemented so he can then line up all the sound effects that he's put in. So these are really, like, there's no second chance on these. You have to hit these deadlines, even if it means staying up all night to do them. The point at which the developer is expected to deliver a piece of predetermined content. Okay, so that's a few common terms. Next up, we're going to look at the mechanics, dynamics, aesthetic framework for designing a game.